This episode is made possible by our sponsor, Landmark College, the college for students who learn differently, offering comprehensive supports for students with ADHD and other learning differences, both on campus and online. Learn more at lcdistraction.org.
I was at this retiree luncheon for the teachers from my high school, and I said to one of them, because I used to crochet in her class, I was fidgeting. I didn't know it, but I was. And so, I apologized. I was like, geez, I'm sorry. I was a bad student, blah, blah, blah. And she stopped me and she was like, excuse me, you were never a bad student. She was like, you could crochet in class and only halfway pay attention and you would still get A's. Everybody was jealous of that. And I was like, what? She was like, yeah, like you were not a bad student. I don't understand why you feel that way. I don't know why you think that you weren't a bad student. And it blew my mind because I spent so much time thinking that I was, because I would crochet in class, because I was always all over the place with homework and things like that. To me, that said bad student. To her, she was like, you were so brilliant, you didn't have to do none of that stuff. Even though I had to be on your behind about it, that does not a failure make. And I was like, oh, well, I've got to go back and reframe the way that I've been looking at this. I'm René Brooks, and welcome to Distraction. Today, I'm sharing the second part of a conversation I had recently with Inger Shaye Colzie, a psychotherapist and ADHD leadership coach. She's also a really good friend of mine. Earlier this week, you heard the first half of my conversation with Inger Shaye when we spoke about developing a collaborative relationship with your clinician and about some of the cultural issues affecting Black people with ADHD and Black women in particular. So you'll definitely want to take a listen to that episode if you haven't heard it yet. In today's episode, Inger Shaye Colzie and I discuss how to find and use your strengths, and we talk about why having self-compassion is so important. But first, we talked about accommodations, and as you're about to hear, Inger Shaye thinks the word accommodation misses the mark.
So it's interesting as they call them accommodations. I don't. I just feel like this is what I need to be successful.
This is
and since
what
we're
I
all
need.
trying to have equity, right? So that we all just have what we need to be successful, then give me what it is that I need. And if what I need are emails and deadlines, or, if you're still a student, like time on test, or somebody else to write the notes, because I remember that, trying to look at the board and then writing the notes and going back to the board. It's like, oh my goodness. So,
and when you bring the ADHD in, then it's almost like they're having to filter, well, do I believe in ADHD? Well, if I believe in ADHD, do I believe that this person has ADHD? Okay, well, if I believe both of those things to be true, then do I think that someone who has ADHD deserves this thing that they're asking? Whereas if you just say, I need this, you're cutting all of that mental work that they're going to do when you bring the ADHD into it out completely. And then they just go, can I give them the time? Can I give them the notes? Can I give them what they need? Yes or no?
Yes, and it becomes that the yes or no question. It does not become about your ADHD. It becomes about what you need, which I think is really important, because what you don't want is to limit you in the way that people perceive you. So again, there's nothing wrong with it, and I'm not hiding it. I'm not saying don't tell people. It's just when you lead with that, and people want to just lead, like,
I have ADHD, so therefore, and then people immediately jump into the don't use that as an excuse defense.
Or they don't want to give you like bigger projects, or they don't want to trust you with things.
Yes.
You'll be around and go, well, everybody has a little ADHD, which allows them to not to give you the thing that you need, where they may have just given it to you.
If you had just asked for it without bringing this stigmatized diagnosis into the conversation. Not that it's just like you said, not that it's a bad thing. It's just that let's just cut to the chase, which is something we're not good at, to be fair. We
True.
really struggle
True.
with cutting to the chase, but I mean, this is an area where learning to cut to the chase would be beneficial for us. And all of this is a learned skill. I think that's the thing that is lost in conversation a lot of times too. When people hear you can be an advocate for yourself, you can say things this way, you can say things that way, you can do this instead. And people go, well, I can't do that. I've never done that. It's a skill. You can acquire it, you can learn it, you can practice it. Just like everything that you're doing to learn about your ADHD, learning to manage your ADHD is a skill. It's like learning a language that changes. Never mind the part that it changes. There's always increasing vocabulary words coming into the language. Never mind that.
That is true. Managing it, because there is that movement of just let me be who I am. And I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And I understand, like the masking that we do as people with ADHD, and the code switching that happens, for being a Black woman. And it's like we're so tired of that. But there's also everyone being together. So the same way that you want to just be who you are, it's like allowing the other people to be who they are too, right? So it's not just them
Yes.
accommodating you, it's everyone accommodating everyone else. And that to me is where if you ask for what you need and we don't leave with these things, then we can just get there and not have it where that makes the divide, right? Because that can be what makes the divide. And, again, we advocate, people obviously know I have ADHD.
Yes.
It's very interesting because they'll be like, well, you can't have it because you have a graduate degree, right? But my friends know I could be late for anything.
That's it.
I'm late, like almost everything. But it's because that's not how it affects everything. And most people don't understand that. So taking that time, you said learning the skill of it, learning your own ADHD so you know what to ask for, right? That to me is the first thing. Accepting you
Absolutely.
have ADHD and then learning how it affects you. So you can say, oh, this is what I need. So, because you might not need it in an email. You might be somebody who's an auditory processor, and that's great. But if you do need an email, then to ask for that, say, oh, when things are written down, that works for me. And not being afraid, go, oh my goodness, I don't want to ask them to write. Nobody else asked them to do that. I don't want to do that. Standing up and saying, this is what I need to be successful in life, and learning that skill. And I think that's that's what coaching is part of.
Yes.
People come and they say like they're overwhelmed or they're, they're not in the place they want to be. And it's just like holding them back. And it's like, okay, let's look at where the ADHD comes in for you. So then you can know what you need. And then by then you will have the skills to be able to start asking for what you need. And once you ask a few times, it feels so good that you're going to ask all the time.
Therein lies the
It kind of
thing.
builds
Once you
upon
stretch
itself.
that muscle, you're like, wait a minute. Like there are things that I ask for help with without hesitation now that, back in 2009, I would have been too busy being embarrassed about the fact that I needed support in an area to even begin to know how to ask. And now I'm just like, hey, that thing over there, that's not a thing I do. Can you do that part? I'll do this part that you're not so great at. I think that's another thing that we don't talk about when we talk about accommodation. Like it doesn't all have to be a one-sided thing because we have skills and gifts that we can bring to the table too. So that if you're feeling like you don't have to feel like a burden, if you can offer something as an exchange versus you always having to be the person with your cap in your hand asking for something, like offer too, because you're capable. I think that's one of the things that being diagnosed later in life takes away from some of us. We just walk around constantly feeling like we don't have anything to offer or give, or we've dismissed ourselves as incapable so often that we feel like other people do that. And sometimes it's not them, it's just us. That's how we feel about us. And we're projecting that feeling onto other people. So like, ask for your accommodations, give accommodations, because everybody in life needs accommodations, whether you have ADHD or not. Everybody has a thing that makes them who they are that they might need support with.
It's interesting. That's why, like I said, sometimes calling it like Accommodations sounds like that kind of one down perspective. I need something that's, you're giving me something.
What would you call it? Like assistance, support, I guess is
Well,
the best
support the
word,
things
huh?
that you need to be, yeah, support, or things you need to be successful. So, it is kind of semantics, but I also think language, is important. And I think part of it is fostering that kind of one down perspective, as you're saying, like, oh, I'm the one, it's always me, right?
Yeah.
Everything's wrong because of me. I'm the one that's done something wrong. I'm the one that's, making things not go. I'm the one that everybody's looking at like something is wrong. And I'm the one that has the problem. Where
Yes.
in real life, everybody has issues, right? Everybody has problems. Everybody has things that they could use support, as you say, support in. And when you can give back to people too, that also fosters so much agency in you, like just, self-confidence in you. And we all have something to give. Leaning in on the things like you're saying that you're really great at, those things, leaning on those and offering those gifts when you're asking for support from someone else in things that they're better at doing. And it is a give and take, right? We do have things to offer, and to remember that we do. And if you feel like you are asking the same person, then get a couple people in your life and ask a few of them, but then
Okay.
give things in return, right? Because they need things in return. Like I just
Exactly.
think about, I'm blessed with some wonderful and beautiful long-term friendships. And yes, my friends had to wait for me being late. If you, however long you've known me, you've had to wait for me being late. But also, and I ask for that grace, that people will come to me for a lot of advice.
Yes.
If you want it straight, you come to me. If you need somebody to kind of, be in your corner, I will always be there. Many times people ask me just for wisdom because I have that ADHD thing where there's a lot of information that's in my head that I can recall
Yes.
on a dime. And because I can kind of MacGyver a lot of stuff, if people are in a jam and they need like some out of the box thinking, they'll come to me, and I'm happy to do that.
Listen, yes, I tell people that all the time. If you get in a jam, you better call me because I've been in a lot of weird scenarios. It's not, I mean, Inger Shaye and I are friends in real life. So, like, she's seen me. I'll take a call and somebody will be like, hey, what happens when I have 50 jars of peanut butter and they all melted? And I'm like, use Dawn to get it out of the carpet. Talk to you later. Like we've landed in a lot of strange scenarios. That's not a literal thing that happened, although it wouldn't shock me if it did. Like I think that's the thing. Like that's a thing, right? Like that's a thing for people with ADHD. And I don't think we see it as a strength. I think we find so often we're finding new ways to disempower ourselves because we feel a certain way about it. And I think most of us, if we think about it, I've always been the person that people come to when they need advice on a particular thing. I think if you look back, just like when we are diagnosed later in life and we look back over the course of our life to identify our symptoms, wouldn't it be nice if we look back over the course of our lives to identify those strengths as well? Because I've always been the person you could call to find out the answer to some weird problem you're having. I'm sure you always have too, like your entire life. People know that's a skill too.
Yes, it's interesting. I was talking to a client yesterday, and this is my ADHD coaching wheelhouse. And I said, when you go out into the world, do people just walk up to you and start telling you everything about their lives? It's like, yes. I said, because there's a flashing light in your head that says, talk to me. And she
Yes.
was like, what? There's a neon flashing light that says that. And she was like, what are you talking about? I said, it happens to me all the time. And you're right. People don't think that that's a skill because it's innate for me. Um, and, when people are in a jam, like I have big ideas, I've got giant thoughts, they're
Yes.
running through my head all the time. So when there's something that's going a bit awry, you know, I can in a minute go, okay, this is what we're doing. And I've always, known that meant I could get out of most jams. And other people see that too. So that's how they'll call me.
Yes.
And using that as a strength. So it's like when I need support in getting to the Eagles game, fly, Eagles, fly, Eagles game on time, my girlfriend came to come get me, right? She came to come and pick me up so we could be there on time because she knew that I needed that support. And as
Yes.
we were going down there, we were talking about some things that she needed to work out, to have some more success in her life. And when you can do that for people, it becomes that, push pull. That feels good. And you also don't feel that one down perspective because you realize that everybody has issues. Yes,
Yes.
my issues are those more of the doing issues, right? Because I have big ideas, but sometimes to getting to doing the thing, right? Productivity. Like it's, that's what ADHD is, more of like a doing issue. I need support on that. That's why I really love ADHD coaching, because most of the time my clients think that there's something really wrong with them. And I'm here to say, like, there's nothing really wrong with you. There's some things you have to manage, absolutely, but there's nothing wrong with you. And I always, they're
Yes.
not lazy, crazy, stupid, dumb. You're none of those things, but they're things you need to manage, because when we're in that, where you look at yourself and it's like, sometimes I can't get myself off the couch, or sometimes I can't get, like, so the report was due this day and I just couldn't get it done. But you did all these other things that you totally discount. And like you said, that lens of when you look backwards to not even notice those things. And that's when we don't put ourselves in the picture. Or when we do, it's like we really discount the things that we do. And that's where I coach from, especially with people with late stage and like later late stage, which is why I think I'm going to start calling it later late stage
You know
diagnosis,
what?
where well, well, it's to me, and it's just, the older you are when you do get diagnosed, it's like, to me, you've got so many things to mind. You have so many things to look back at to see
Yeah.
how you were successful, because you're still here and you got
Yes.
here, right? Now, if you got here, we'll look back at all the ways that you were able to figure things out to be able to get to where we are now, because it was not easy. It was hard. Especially if you don't
Yes.
know what's going on with you. With your my whole life, I was completely confused. Like, some parts were easier, some parts were harder. I think when you do look back, sometimes you have that lens of not remembering things as bad as they were. But it's that to look at, how were you successful? That's the resilience, that's the grit, and that's how you end up living well. Because it's like, oh, I do have grit, I do have resilience, I do have a lot of ways that I'm able to manage stuff that some of the other people, your friends that might be able to be on time or get the report out, have they struggle a little more with. And using that to be able to move your life forward, and using that as a skill to give to other people when you need support. And I feel like that's a big part of advocacy. When you can look at your strengths, then you're able to go, oh, these are the things that I can see, the things that I do have weaknesses on, or I need to figure out. And that's how you're able to kind of pinpoint what that is. Because sometimes I will also say, like, sometimes I ask for help because I don't know what to ask for help with, right?
That part. When you get
Yeah.
diagnosed and people are like, okay, you have ADHD and you have the medicine, so it's all fixed. What's the problem? And you're like, if I knew why I couldn't do this thing, then I would have already figured out what the solution was and we wouldn't be sitting here with a problem. Have you ever known me to know what the problem was and not resolve it? That's not a thing I do. So if I'm stuck, help me. Go get the chains. We stuck in the mud.
Yeah. And so sitting down, and as we spoke of, being patient, because all these are skills. Like, we're mining through all these things of, it's that whole thing with onions and layers to be able to get to what's actually going on. So then you do know what to ask help for with, and the things that you can give as assistance to others, that then you can be more successful. And then we can get to maybe a timer or a planner or some of those things like
Yes.
that. So we got to get through those different layers so you do know, because many times that's really what I get from my clients. It's like, I thought I had ADHD. Okay, maybe I do, I don't. Some people get medicated or they don't, but they feel as soon as they know about it, then will they be able to just fix it? And it's like, no, we have to figure out how it works for you, and for you to really dig in
Yes.
there and be patient in learning the skills, right? And learning, like, how, what it is for you, and then being able to learn the skills. And then you can know what you need to ask for. And you can push back against those things, like the cultural norms, like we were speaking of, not asking for help, not putting yourself in the picture, and wanting to do everything by yourself. Because I don't think anybody wants to, but we feel like we
No.
have to,
But they
like
feel
letting
like if they
things
don't,
go.
they're setting themselves up for criticism. I think that's one of the reasons why people are afraid sometimes of looking at their strengths, because so many of us with ADHD, if there was one thing that we were good at, it was almost spun against us. Like, you're smart, so therefore you shouldn't need support in this. You're resilient in this area, so therefore you don't need anything in this area. You're just making it up, making excuses, whatever. We don't have to be afraid of those strengths. Like, if you reach into those strengths and find out what about it is a strength, then you can use it to identify what you need support in. Like, oh man, my favorite thing now, like, because you get into certain, isn't it funny how when you're coaching, like, it's like certain topics like just have a season. So one of the things that I've been hearing a lot lately are people coming in and going, I need a system. I just need a system to organize the way that I do things. I need a system. And I'm like, okay, so let's talk about systems. So you find a system and it's working really well and you're really happy with it. And then all of a sudden it just doesn't work anymore, right? And they're like, yeah, that. And I'm like, okay, you have ADHD, you get bored. What do you think's happening there? And they're like, oh, what you're telling me is you're able to come up with a system and employ the system, and that it works for a long enough length of time that you're seeing success from the system. It's just that you get bored with the system. You can plan ahead for that and find a new system to jump into. Or if there was one that worked before you put this one into place, go back to the old one. You ever start doing something and go, man, I loved doing this. Why did I ever stop doing this? This works so well for me. Well, you're coming back to it and it's fresh again. It's not routine anymore. Like, we have ADHD. It's okay to know that about yourself and plan for you to be you. And so often we see that as a failure of our, like, I'm no good, or I'm bad, or I'm inconsistent. You're not inconsistent. Your brain struggles against that routine. Once you're bored with it, your brain cuts that off and it's done. That's you having ADHD. That's not a failure. And people go, oh, because we are so used to thinking of that as failure. And I think it would benefit us if we could get into a place where we look for other areas in our life that our symptoms show up, that we've convinced ourselves means something other than what it means. Like, I was at this retiree luncheon for the teachers from my high school, and I said to one of them, because I used to crochet in her class, I was fidgeting. I didn't know it, but I was. And so, I apologized. I was like, geez, I was, I'm sorry. I was a bad student, blah, blah, blah. And she stopped me and she was like, excuse me, you were never a bad student. She was like, you could crochet in class and only halfway pay attention and you would still get A's. Everybody was jealous of that. And I was like, what? And she was like, yeah, like you were not a bad student. I don't understand why you feel that way. I don't know why you think that you weren't a bad student. And it blew my mind because I spent so much time thinking that I was, because I would crochet in class, because I was always all over the place with homework and things like that. To me, that said bad student. To her, she was like, you were so brilliant, you didn't have to do none of that stuff. Even though I had to be on your behind about it, that does not a failure make. And I was like, oh, well, I've got to go back and reframe the way that I've been looking at this.
Yes, it's interesting because for me, it's kind of the opposite. I was seen as a bad student or somebody who just couldn't get it together. It was very perplexing because it was like, you are so smart.
Yeah.
And it's obvious. And we see these big flashes of brilliance and then we don't. And so it wasn't looked at. People weren't always as nice as they were to you about that and feeling that way.
Oh, no, girl, that's because I was grown. I was at a retiree luncheon. She did
old.
not say it that way when I was a
perspective.
teenager at all. It was like, why can't you get it together and do your homework and put that crochet hook down and stop goofing off in my class? It was very much like that.
Well, and isn't that interesting? Like her perspective later, right?
Yes.
That she's giving you now, but at that time she wasn't giving you that. And the feeling that you took with that for all of these years. And that is what happens for us. We do take these different feelings, and people are meaning making machines. We make meaning out of everything.
Yes.
And when the world is set up more for, they said, if people are on time or more organized, they can be seen as somebody who's more competent. And then we already have the, strikes about or perceived strikes, because they aren't strikes, of being, like a Black woman, then it can feel like the world's against us. And we can't even get to looking at like where the ADHD comes in. Most people don't even know. So when I have my clients, that's why I look at, where were your strengths before? Like, how did you get here? Because you obviously have them, or you wouldn't be here, right? You wouldn't be
Yes.
here. And to take a second and, they'll come with like overwhelm. Well, why are you overwhelmed? They have no idea. And we'll dig in. And I very rarely, or sometimes if I start with saying, oh yeah, you want to use a planner, use the planner. Because sometimes they got to get out of that. They got to get out of that first, right? They have to, they're only going to listen if they get their system. But generally, I don't do that, because that's not going to be helpful, right?
No.
It's the rapport that you have with your coach, and, being there holding space for them and allowing them to discover that, oh, the ADHD has come in this way, and I've kind of internalized it in that way. And once I know how I'm internalizing it because of how it's affecting me, I can unravel that and then use that in every place that I go, right? So it's not just I need a planner so I can be organized. It's that I know that I have no concept of time, right? So I'm going to be late. I can have self-compassion about that. And it does not make me a bad person. It means that I'm somebody that has to actually be intentional about being on time.
That's right.
Which means I have to be intentional about, I know I can be disorganized. Am I ever going to have a system that looks like everybody else's? Absolutely not. Being okay with it. How much of a system do I actually need? How much do I not need? How much does it not care? And where the ADHD comes up with that. And most of all, having some self-compassion, which is the one thing we do not have. And most people think that that's a weakness, where that is the biggest strength you can have, is to have self-compassion. And then look at how it's affecting me, and then how I can be successful anyway. Most of the time, it's that self-compassion. You can figure out ways that are going to work for you. You actually know the answers. I'm just helping you to kind of get there. There's some weeds and things in the way. So I'm just kind of helping you chop down them to finally get to where it is that you can be successful the way you want to. You have a choice. And it's funny, many people think it's like, oh, I'm going to tell them just to be nice and let things go, or just, always like happy, rosy. It's like, no. I want you to choose how you feel, what you're doing, to know the origins of why you're doing it. So then you can have a choice. And if the choice is to maybe fuss somebody out, then that's a choice.
I love that choice. That's one of my favorite choices.
But yeah, as I said before, sometimes, but I'm hoping if you're fussing people out left and right, then maybe there's something else you need to look at. Like, why would that be? But you do get a choice. And sometimes that choice is, the appropriate choice. And if it's appropriate for you. So it's not that it's all rosy, and it doesn't mean that at the end of coaching, you're just going to organize and I'm on time, and I can prioritize and I can do all that stuff. And it's like, if you could do that, like, I'd love to have the magic wand. But what you can do is have a life that you accept and love, that you are in control of. And that peace, that inner peace, is, why I'm here, and why when things get hard or get difficult, or when you can't get the tech to work, that we still come on and do what we do. Because giving that peace, helping people find that peace for themselves, is a joy beyond belief for me. And it's so necessary for everyone with ADHD, but especially for us with Black women with ADHD, because we have so many things on our plate and so many things that we have to do, that when you can have that peace, you are just far more productive than you've ever been. You have far more motivation. It's all the things that people come to me for. You do not feel as overwhelmed. You do not feel as disorganized, or if you are disorganized, because I've got all these notebooks here, it doesn't overwhelm you anymore. You can figure out ways to do this and live well.
Yes.
And I just think it's really, I mean, so I can't say it enough to realize that this is a process. But it's also like, there's a science behind this. I'm starting to say that it's practical brain-based science with, a little black girl magic. So like
right.
coach is like, that's what it's about. And I always have to call out that I have a coach, and my coach is white. He's a white male, right? And we have bonded through our experience, and our ADHD presentation is the same. We present the same way. And I think that is part of the reason why we were able to bond. So I've had to explain things. The cultural competency isn't always there, but the willingness to learn and the willingness to know that he doesn't know, and to not put his thoughts or feelings on top of mine, to let me lead in the way I need to lead for my life, means that that's how he's able to coach me in this initiative to help Black women with ADHD. So I don't always want people to think that, oh, if I just get a Black coach, then everything's going to be perfect, or I get a Black therapist, they're going to get me and understand me. It's not always that. You always have to find somebody that you really feel comfortable with, that you vibe with, that you vibe with, right? That's how you're able to really make progress. And taking the time and giving the space to do that with whoever your coach is. What I hate to have happen is sometimes this happens where people are like, I'm not doing this with anybody who's not Black. And it's like, okay, unfortunately, there aren't enough of us. There are more of us than ever, but there aren't enough of us. And I'd rather you get some help than to get no help while you're waiting. So I just think it's important to sometimes give a little bit of leeway and see if there's somebody, if you can't get with somebody who looks like you, to give some other people a shot to see if they're able to help you. Because, again, things are getting so bad out here, and people, I know that you are always on wait lists, so am I. So to be able to have people to get some relief, who could help them more than they would ever know if they don't give them a chance.
Yeah. Inger Shaye, thank you so much for coming on. I love to talk to you anytime, but especially when we get a chance to sit and bring the masses along with us. So you got to tell everybody where they can find you.
So I am at ingershaye.com, and I'm at Inger Shaye on all the socials. So I also have a Facebook group for Black women with ADHD executives and entrepreneurs. It's a great place to come and have fellowship and learn about your ADHD. And then also, speaking of finding resources, it's the Black ADHD Coaches Consortium. So it is an association of Black ADHD coaches that we're starting for ADHD Awareness Month. And if you Google my name, it'll be there, and you can sign up if you are a Black ADHD coach.
I'm excited. I'm excited.
Yeah. I'm always so happy to talk to you. Yeah, it's important, but I'm always happy to talk to you. This is like a peek under the hood, right, for people to see what we talk about for hours and hours anyway. So it's good for people to actually get some of the knowledge that we just drop on each other all the time to keep ourselves good and to have community, because with community, all things can happen. That's where the healing is. So Amen. I hope that people come and join both our communities and the coaching association, so we can really, we have a movement.
Yes.
We're having a movement here.
Exactly that. And plus, look, I gotta bring her on a show so she don't get me for billable hours. God forbid if Inger Shaye ever decide to invoice me for all the billable hours worth of advice and information they've given me, child, I go broke. I'm gonna just file bankruptcy as soon as the invoice comes, because I'd be broke. So I'm grateful. Y'all always share your knowledge with me. Thank you.
Oh, this was great. Thank you for having me.
Anytime. Well, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much to Inger Shaye Colzie for joining me. You can learn more about Inger Shaye on her website, ingershaye.com, and you can find her Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Black women with ADHD. We'll also put those links in our show notes. Please remember to subscribe to Distraction wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss an episode. And please let us know what you think. Write an email or record a voice memo and send it to connect@distractionpodcast.com. Distraction is created by Sounds Great Media. Our producer is Sarah Gurton. I'm René Brooks. You can find me at blackgirllostkeys.com. Thank you for joining me.
The episode you just heard was made possible by our sponsor, Landmark College, the college for students who learn differently, offering comprehensive supports for students with ADHD and other learning differences, both on campus and online. Learn more at lcdistraction.org.